There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
What a delight to have Maria of MH Books, the booktube channel MH Books, which she is woefully undersubscribed. I'm hoping that having her on this series will rectify that to some extent. And also my Goodreads friend. Welcome to my channel, Maria.
How are you, Sean? How are you doing?
Oh, I'm better now. It's so great to talk to you. You're such a card on your channel. Your channel just is always entertaining.
Never take it too seriously. Books are supposed to be fun.
That's right. That's right. And you are joining us from Dublin.
I am, yes.
How are things in Dublin?
It's getting back to normal here. We're getting back to real life. We're allowed inside places. Some of the pubs open for the first time in a year and a half, which is a big news in Dublin.
Great. But please promise me that you will never become normal, because that would not be good.
That wouldn't be possible.
I won't if you won't. And we are here to talk about this debut novel set in Dublin, Boys Don't Cry by Fíona Scarlett. I have a copy. I haven't read it. Maria has recently finished it and loved it, and she is here to tell us why.
This book is, I actually really appreciated that you asked me to talk about this book, because it sort of reflects kind of my background. It gave me a chance to talk a little bit about my background. Now, this is set in criminal Dublin. I'm not from a criminal family, but I am from a working class family from the flats originally. So it was nice to actually see a book that you can relate to a little bit. So it was a nice thing. This book is about two brothers. We have Finn, who is 12 years old. He is sort of our glimpse into the world. He's very innocent for a 12-year-old. He's having a particularly hard time, but he's our glimpse, an innocent glimpse into the world of what's like to live in these flats. And he loves ice cream. He loves going around shopping trolleys, which are obviously stolen from the supermarket. But, you know, he loves to do that kind of stuff. And he loves the fact that the county council never made the garden they promised into a garden because he can play football, which other people know as soccer. So, you know, he's our innocent glimpse into this family, whereas Joe is the older brother, 17. And from his perspective, because it's told in these two perspectives, we can see this family is the dad is beating up the mum. The dad is a heavy henchman for the local crime lord. And that it's tough to live in these flats. It's tough. Joe would be our hero. I mean, this is very simplistically drawn if you actually look at these characters. Joe is our hero. Joe protects everybody. He protects his younger brother. He protects his friends. And he's the kind of person who is going to be what the gangland is going to try and draw in. So it's interesting, you know, all these dynamics that Fíona has written into her book. Mm-hmm. And just to see the world through the innocence of Finn, which she did purposely, I believe, and to see it from Joe's perspective, what it's like to be working class, living in these flats, because Joe is living here, but he's also gotten this scholarship to this very prestigious school. So he's mixing with some particularly rich kids as well. So he has perspective of both sides.
It sounds like it's a really emotional story.
Yes, I did cry at my Friday reads. I filmed it 4 times.
If you're okay, I'll link to that video. I didn't want to watch it until we did the interview, but you have right in the title of your video that this was a bit of a tearjerker for you.
I cried during the actual video itself. I cried 4 times trying to film it. And I do give a little bit of a plot spoiler in it, so people are warned. So just be careful if you want to go in completely blind. Don't look at that bit. But Fíona gives it in her interviews in radio. So, you know, the author likes to tell you up front what's about.
Okay. No problem. And when I listened to you talk about it, and when I read the synopsis a few minutes ago, I was kind of reminded of Shuggie Bain.
Yeah, a lot of people are comparing to that, and I haven't read Shuggie Bain yet.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, so that was my top read of last year. So
Yeah, yeah.
It sounds like a Sean book.
Yeah, it sounds like a Sean book. I think near the end, I want to see the Sean Bale near the end of this book, though. There's something happens at the end of this book.
Okay, you think that I might bail on the last page or something?
With the third last chapter, I think.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
It'll be too at the end.
So the tone of this, it's dramatic and it's
it's very emotional. Yeah, it's meant to make you cry. It is meant to make you cry.
But not sentimental.
It is sentimental. That's where I think it gets sentimental towards the end. Okay. Fíona has deliberately tried to show these characters with a lot of love. They come from working class Dublin, but she wants to show her people as people. They're in a particularly difficult circumstance with Finn during this book, and she uses Finn's perspective to show that, you know, these are people, but she wraps it up a little bit too sentimentally for me. It's too sentimental because I'm just, I just wanted a little bit more subtlety in her characterization.
Well, that's me too. But I still definitely want to try it, and it's a debut novel, so she can
improve.
She can improve, and it's got a really high rating on Goodreads, 4.54. Eric loved it. One of my forthcoming guests for this series loved it. So yeah, people seem to be responding to it. And what would you say about the writing, the prose?
The prose is extraordinarily well done, and as is the dialogue, because this is where class. I don't know what the word is, slang, vernacular used in this book. So she uses, the dialogue is perfect. It's spot on. It's exactly, my brother, I don't speak like that because I lived in Australia for 8 years. When I was I was born in Dublin, but from the age of 6 months to 8, I lived in Australia. But my brother is 8 years younger than me. So he has spoken English always in this vernacular, and it's perfect. It's spot on, a bit crude in parts, but I think that goes over most people's heads because you don't actually know what's happening, what it means.
I know who to call if I have trouble understanding the crude bits, Maria. So that'll work out great. Good to have you in my life.
Try and listen to it on audio. I've forgotten the name of the audio narrator. Could you put his name up?
Put it down. Yeah, put the audio.
This is effing amazing on it.
Well, I will definitely try to track that down. Maria, thank you. This has been great. Thank you so much.
Bye.
I would like to welcome one of my Goodreads friends who I didn't really know why we were Goodreads friends. And now I've just found out it's because she found my BookTube channel and then got onto my Goodreads. So yay. And we are meeting for the first time, obviously. Adiba from London. Welcome, Adiba.
Thank you for having me on, Sean.
It's wonderful to meet you. And you read a collection of translated stories from Korea that I'm going to set you a rather challenging, daunting task, Adiba, because I don't like horror speculative fiction at all. So you have to convince me that I need to read this, but I am attracted to the cover and the title, and the writer herself sounds fascinating. So it's Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung, translated from the Korean by Anton Hur. The cover is fabulous. I love the title, Cursed Bunny.
The cover is why I actually read it.
So this is a cover by kind of interview all the way around. So convince me, why should I read this, Adiba?
So I really don't like short story collections. I think that's how I started off my Goodreads, saying I don't like short story collections. I think they're of incredibly varying quality. You read one good story, the next one's a dud, the next one's okay. And what I really liked about this story that was very surprising is that the Bora Chung, her entire kind of collection is solid. It's a solid collection. There's some that I didn't, enjoy as much as others, but there was none that I would say that was a waste of, space or time, or that could have been edited out. Interesting that you don't like horror. So I have a mixed kind of relationship with horror because I want to be genuinely scared, which most reading horror, I don't really get that very much. I wouldn't say Bora Chung's collection is necessarily scary. It is creepy. She does use gross out horror. So, you know, if anyone watching doesn't like gross out things, they might want to miss the first two stories. A lot of her stories, they have an underpinning. There's a real kind of political and social commentary. It's not just, you know, scary for the sake of being scary or gross for the sake of being gross. So one of the ones that I think, you know, you might find it interesting is the embodiment. The embodiment is really interesting because, I mean, I think you said, you know, I can't really spoil a short story, so I'll give you a very short synopsis of what the embodiment is. A woman is having very unusual periods, and she goes to the doctors and finds out that, you know, even though she's a virgin, she's pregnant. And the nurse and the doctors are saying, hey, you're pregnant, you're a virgin, you don't have a husband, you need to find a husband before your baby is born, or else your baby is going to be messed up. Like, it's going to be awful. You need to find a husband. And so begins this weird, bizarre story of her family and friends trying to find her a husband before the baby is born. And I thought, even though that wasn't one of my favorite stories, I thought there was so much discussion that could be had about the pressure we put, especially on single mothers. You know, the idea that, you know, if you're raising a child as a single mother, you're doing something wrong. Your child is not going to benefit, or the same way that, you know, children from a nuclear family are going to benefit. Yeah.
And I think those cultural stresses are much more, don't pretend to know much about South Korean culture, but I think those prejudices and stresses on a single mother would be much more pronounced in a South Korean context.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I thought that the way she turned that into a bit of a creepy horror, bizarre story was quite interesting, because you know what she's trying to say. And that's something that you can see in every story. There's quite a lot of stories. If you read some of the Goodreads reviewers, they'll say it's about capitalism. It's a criticism of greed. There's a story, I'm just looking at my thing, called Snare, which I said was a riff off the old tale of King Midas. Just this very frightening, I found quite frightening story of child abuse and greed, and the way that a father is using his children to get a lot of money for himself and gain a lot of wealth for himself. So yeah, no, each of the stories, even if you're not a massive horror fan, you can analyze them and you can find a deeper meaning in them.
So they work on a few different levels. So how about the setting? Do they feel like they're set in a recognizable geographical setting, for example, Korea, or are they not?
So they're set in different places. So there's one called The Ruler of Winds and Sands, which I think a lot of people didn't like that much. I quite liked. It's very fairy tale folklorish, but that's completely set in a fantasy setting. You know, it's set on a floating boat in the middle of a desert, so that's completely fantasy. There's The Reunion, which is a ghost story of the lot, which a lot of people liked. It's a Korean narrator, but she's in Poland. And I think you might know more about this than I do. I think Bora Chung has links to Poland and Eastern Europe.
Yeah, I find her story just as interesting as this, maybe even more interesting to me than this collection of short fiction. I don't know what her connection is to Poland, but one of the things that she does is she's a translator of Polish and Russian literature into Korean. Right. And she teaches at a Korean university, teaching Polish and Russian language and literature. She has an MA from Yale and a PhD from Indiana University. So she is an extremely well-educated academic translator and speculative fiction writer.
Right. So maybe, I mean, in that case, especially people who know Eastern European literature, they might actually find more
resonance with those literatures.
Yeah, because it seems she might have been influenced by it, because I haven't read much Korean literature. I've read some Japanese literature, and you can very much tell you're reading Japanese literature when you're reading it. While I did think this collection of stories was quite like you're reading a Western writer in a way. I don't know whether Korean literature, I don't know how, you know, that differs from Japanese literature and the way that they tend to write their stories. But The Reunion is set in Poland, and it's about, it has a little bit of Polish history as well. So I thought that was a bit random, but I thought, you know, later I saw that she did have links to Poland. There are some, you know, that usually the protagonists are Korean.
You know which of these stories, I think it might be The Head, but she won an award for many years ago?
I think it was The Head. Yeah, that was the one that you can also find online.
Okay.
I believe you can find it online. The Head is absolutely disgusting.
You said, and a disgusting misshapen lump pops out of a woman's toilet, and it's kind of like a head type thing.
Yeah,
It begins a conversation with.
It's this bizarre story of this woman just randomly using the bathroom one day, and a head, which is made of her waste, her bodily waste, is animate and is talking to her and keeps saying, "You're my mother," and just kind of essentially haunts her. And it's such a, when you think about it, it's like you're being haunted by your own bodily waste. It's such a strange and bizarre story, but
it just works.
It just works, and it's gross, but it's also, there again is social kind of commentary about raising children, and it's so strange. And at first I read it and I thought, this is a bit gross, this is weird, and then I found myself too frightened to use my own bathroom. And I was like, It took me back to when I was a child, because when I was a child, I was often scared of using the loo and showering because I always thought that snakes would come either out of the bathroom or out of my shower head. And it took me back to that kind of weird fear, which I think maybe a lot of people have but don't talk about, of things popping up.
That's right. Well, I watched the first few minutes of an interview with Bora Chung, and she talked about when she was an undergrad at university, so I don't know, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, there was a short story contest, and the prize was about $1,000 cash prize. And that is the only reason she wrote the story. She had no interest in writing before that, but she said, I wanted the money, so I wrote this story. And that's what launched her literary career.
That's very unusual. That's a very unusual.
Yeah, I mean, she may be embellishing it to make it a good story, I don't know, but that's what she said. So
I respect that £1,000 that she brings out of this very, very, it's very well rated. I think I've only seen kind of quite positive reviews of it so far.
Well, you have nudged me closer to wanting to try this, but I'm still a little leery, but I know that you will have sold it to many a viewer. So Adiba, you're a natural. I hope that you will come back.
I hope you'll have me back.
I will definitely have you back. And you write very smart reviews on Goodreads. I'm going to put a link to your Goodreads and your Instagram. People can follow you. And I think we might be seeing you on your own channel one of these days.
I hope so.
I would like to welcome a new guest to my Bite-Sized Book Chat series, Sarah Hope from the Santa Cruz area of California, a fairly new Goodreads friend. Welcome, Sarah Hope.
Well, hello.
I think I actually friended you because somebody else in my friends list liked your review of this book. And the book is Radiant Fugitives by Nawaaz Ahmed. And I friended you hoping that you would say yes, and you did. And then I asked you to come on and you said yes, and here we are. So Radiant Fugitives, please tell us about it.
Oh, it's a marvelous book. In my more hyperbolic moments, I feel like this is what the great American novel of our era should be. It's diasporic. It's got a really interesting range of characters, none of whom are sort of the straight cut out white middle class person you get in a lot of family dramas. And basically, this is a family drama. The three main characters are a mother and her two daughters. There's a father who's rather pompous and controlling, who's in India. The older daughter, Seema, was thrown out of the house when she was very young because she was a lesbian. She's wound up in San Francisco, made a good life for herself, is a political consultant, and she's actually working on Kamala Harris's Attorney General campaign during the time of the book. So it's this little sort of flashback to the past and knowing where she is now. Tahira is her younger sister, and she's sort of taken the completely opposite path. She was never close with her father the way the older one was. The older one was the little darling until they found out who she loved. The younger one has become a much more rigid Muslim. Her mother doesn't wear a hijab. She does. She's very, very careful about doing the prayers 5 times a day, about doing in the right way, about doing the things you need to do beforehand to be clean for doing the prayers. it's not fundamentalist in this sense of irrational. It's fundamentalist in the sense of a really deep commitment to a faith that she lets guide her life. And the mother, Nafisa, is dying of cancer. She hasn't seen either of her daughters in quite a long time because they both live in the US now. The older one in San Francisco, like I said, the younger one is in Texas working as an OBGYN. And Nafisa's husband didn't want her to come out here, but she decided she was going to come out, and she did against his will, which is probably, it seems like the first time she's ever done that. Sima is pregnant. She was married at one point. She identified as lesbian. At one point, she fell in love with a particular man. They got married. It didn't work out. They split up. And then when they were signing the divorce papers, they had one of those little, woohoo, we're signing the divorce papers. Now let's have, memory sex or something. And she winds up pregnant. So that's besides wanting to see her daughters, that's the real cause that's bringing Nafisa out to San Francisco. And there are so many tensions in this book between those three women.
It's really,
I think Sima and Tahira both feel like the other one got more of their mother's attention than they did. Tahira looks down on Sima's lesbianism. I think Sima looks down on Tahira's fundamentalism. There's a kind of, they're having to wrestle with their lack of respect for each other and not let it take over. The story opens with the narrator telling us that Sima has died giving birth. Who that narrator is Ishraq, her unborn son.
wow.
And he's narrating this entire book to his grandmother, kind of telling his grandmother a version of everything she experienced during that time. And, through the mysteries of omniscient fetuses, he knows what people are thinking. He knows what people are feeling. And so in a way, he's explaining it much better than she could understand it.
That sounds incredible. So in your review, you talked about how there's all kinds of novels out there about divided families, but this one hits you quite differently.
I absolutely loved it. And I loved it because no matter who you are, you're going to feel both like an insider and an outsider as you read this novel. I really believe that. There's such a range of human experience here that you're going to have your aha moments where you say, I've lived this. And you're going to have a lot of moments where you're trying to teach yourself why someone's making the choices they're making, why that's their right choice. And so it's pushing the reader's imagination in terms of empathy. That's not quite the word I want, but at the same time, giving the reader enough personal confirmation that they keep going and they feel like I can be inside here enough. I'm not reading this novel from the outside looking in.
That is a wonderful way to describe it, to pique my interest. Do we know anything about the author? I admit that I listened to part of his interview on the LARB, LARB podcast, but I didn't catch anything really about him. Do you know?
Yeah, I didn't either, and I don't know anything that Ahmed writes from now on. I'm getting it. I'm desperately going to try to get an early copy, and if I don't, I'm finding it and buying it the minute it's out.
So this is his debut, right?
Yes. As far as I know, it is.
Yeah, I think so too. According to nothing else is coming up on Goodreads, and it was just published in early this month.
Yes, yeah. Less than a week ago, I think.
On his website, he describes himself as a transplant from Tamil Nadu, India.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess he must be gay. I thought so listening to the interview. He sounded very gay. He sounded like he was playing on my team. This is great, Sarah Hope. I have to get this book, and if I don't like it, I have you to blame.
You have me to blame, but if you don't like it, you're going to go down in my estimation so much that it will be tragic.
Fair enough.
So just go ahead and like it.
Sarah, Hope, you are a wonderful guest. I hope that you will come back.
Okay, I would be glad to.
Thank you. Well, I'm delighted to welcome back for her second appearance on Bite Size Book Chats, Laura from Illinois. Welcome back, Laura.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
So we're going to talk about an Icelandic novel in translation, and it is called Magma by Þóra Hjörleifsdóttir, translated from the Icelandic by, oh, come on, my...
Meg Matich.
Thank you. Yeah, when I pulled up the Goodreads, it didn't list it. I have library privileges. I'll have to fix that. And I have been curious about this since I saw it referred to in a LitHub article, and you quite liked it. Why don't you set it up for us?
Sure. So it is a novella, and the main character, Lilia, is early 20s, and she's a university student. And the novella is told almost like little vignettes or diary entries, like the short snippets about her relationship with a grad student at the university. And you watch the relationship start, where she's falling in love and she thinks he's great. And then you see that deteriorate into an abusive and manipulative and controlling relationship, but only from her perspective. So you kind of get the sense of how she's losing her own identity and changing herself based on what she thinks she needs to do to stay in this relationship. The writing is incredible. It's tense. It's powerful. It's really unsettling to read. So I think that's the, whether you call it a trigger warning or a thing to be aware of going into it. Emotionally, it's difficult to watch somebody lose themselves in a relationship.
Is she quite a bit younger than the guy? He's a grad student, is she?
She's I would say early 20s. She's lived in Denmark. She's gone and traveled in South America before she meets him. So this isn't like, it's not her first rodeo. She's been out. She's been first in certainly
rodeo. I love that.
Other relationships. She sees him. They discuss poetry. She kind of is pulled into the romance and I think what she perceives as the sophistication of that relationship. But all the while, she's being manipulated and she's altering herself for him, doing things she's not comfortable with. And as you watch the layers of that peel back, it really was really disturbing to read. Like there are times you set it aside and say, okay, I need a break here. But it's less than 200 pages. So for the author to accomplish that in such a short piece is really impressive.
And so you've said kind of trigger warning for like emotional abuse. Would it...
Emotional abuse, sexual abuse.
Oh, okay.
Physical abuse. It really would be, if someone had been in a relationship of that nature, I would think it would be difficult to read. Or if you knew someone who had been in a relationship of that nature, it would be something to be aware of before you picked it up.
But it's not sensationalizing or anything. It's a
very
deep
literary. It didn't feel like it was. Topic. Yeah. It didn't feel sensationalized as much as it just felt. There's a bleakness to what you're seeing her do that it's just difficult to watch. You see her relationship also with her family in a couple of spots, and she has a loving relationship with her family. So the relationships she's seen as she's grown up have been, by all accounts, healthy relationships.
This is going to be an awkward transition because now I want to move from that depth of your analysis to the surface of the cover. Sure. Because when I saw it in the LitHub article, it had a different cover. So we've got the cover up here of what the book looks like, but the cover in the LitHub article was this, and this is the cover from the ARC. Now, you can't see it right now, Laura. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
You've seen it.
I saw a picture of it, but I'm trying to bring it back up to look at it.
Right. It's one of the best covers I've ever seen. And for them to jettison it in favor of this, I mean, this is not an awful cover, but why would they change the cover from the ARC? It's one like, what did they commission an ARC cover and then not use it for this? What's that about? That's driving me crazy.
Well, what I do like about the cover that I got on it was this idea of you just see the surface. Yeah. And not what's under the surface. And for me, that fits, fits the title with Magma, but it also fits kind of the relationship, like what's at the surface and what other people are seeing versus what's kind of happening below the surface. So,
yeah, no, this cover is not terrible. It's just I really love the other one. But you're right. There's now the more you've explained it, the more you've talked about the book, probably the better fit this cover. So maybe there's a. maybe I can let go of that little.
Well, or
pet peeve.
the UK cover might be the other one. So sometimes that'll get you.
No, I think I've checked and it's not. Do we know anything about the author?
This is a debut. This is her
Ah.
first novel. She is a published poet. She's got a couple of poetry collections, which probably speaks to some of the literary feel to the novel and like her ability to give powerful images with just a few words. But this is a debut novel, which for me is even more impressive.
Right. Have you read a lot of Icelandic? Does it have an Icelandic feel?
A little bit, but not as much as some. I'm reading a lot of Icelandic right now. We have a trip coming up, and that's something I like to do is hopefully I have a trip coming up. COVID doesn't interrupt my trip.
Right.
But usually when I'm traveling someplace, I like to read a lot of literature set there and by authors from that place, whatever place it is. So one of the things that attracted me about this was that it was Icelandic. And a lot of the Icelandic that I've found has been crime novels. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking for something that wasn't necessarily a crime novel, although I would say there's elements of the darkness that you get in the noir, but this was more of definitely a domestic thriller.
Well, it sounds like something that I want to try, and I have quite a few Goodreads friends that have read it, and they've all rated it not all, but most of them 4 stars and above. So give us one, if you have one more Icelandic book that's on your TBR, what would it be?
Sure. I think it's Halldór Laxness. He's the Nobel Prize winner. That's right. And I have 2 of his. I have Under the Glacier and I'm looking at them, Independent People. Under the Glacier and Independent People.
Under the Glacier, just by the title, you think, I bet you that's an Icelandic novel.
Yeah. So those are 2 of the several that are on my stack right now.
Well, happy reading and bon voyage if you get there. When's the trip scheduled for?
Just under a month.
Okay, no, you should be fine.
So we should be good.
Yeah, and take a warm coat.
Warm coat and a lot of outdoor isolated activities. So relatively safer scenario.
Well, thanks again, Laura.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks a lot, Sean.